talking about compassion, right? We're talking about this course is one of three on Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and we're here because some kind of attraction or appeal to this idea, right? Loving others, being compassionate, not just thinking about ourselves all the time, and it's a very deep and profound notion. There are certain fundamental human needs. Some are obvious, right? We need food. Food for a couple of days, you really start to feel it's lacking for its absence, right? There's not only the obvious outer things which are essential to life, right? Love and compassion are also essential to life. And there's some kind of fundamental basic human need around these things. And in countries where religion has been crushed and destroyed and expelled in the past, in Russia, China, and other countries, if you go to places like that, you see there's this sort of despair in the culture and the society. And I remember I was in Russia in the 80s, maybe, early 80s, and there was just nothing there. People didn't have enough to eat. There was hopelessness. It was a very bleak place. And then eventually, of course, communism fell. And Russia, clearly, and China too, anyway. And so now, people in Russia have enough to eat, and it's been that way. And if you go there, you see people on the subway create all kinds of spiritual goals. There's a kind of hunger and a kind of starvation that people have in these societies and cultures where there's been a real lack in their lives, a real depravity and deprivation in their lives of these things. So now everywhere you go, you see people reading New Age spiritual books, any kind of spiritual books they get their hands on. China, similarly, there are presses there cranking out hundreds of thousands of these books and trucking them around on the underground because there's such demand, because there's such a desperate desire and need for these things. It's not just the obvious outer supports that we need for our lives of food and shelter and security. It's also the inner supports that we need, inner nourishment that we need to have some kind of fulfilled life and some kind of meaningful life. So when we hear about this idea of Bodhisattva vows, there's something appealing about it, right? There's something about it that brings us here tonight. There's something about it when people read about it anywhere. And the notion of people who live their lives for others, the notion that people are living their lives to help others and to benefit others is very powerful. There's something very attractive about it. And some people have certain seeds in their mind where when they hear about it, they're naturally attracted and they might even get goosebumps and the hairs in the back of their neck stand up. And it's just some kind of very beautiful and sweet and holy thing. The notion, could I do that? What would that be like? Is it possible, right? We talked about last week. Last week was a bit of a sales pitch, right? Last week's class we were talking about the benefits of Bodhicitta and what it's like to really feel Bodhicitta and what the sensation is. And why care and why bother and what do you get if you really develop true Bodhicitta? What's the benefit to you if you develop true Bodhicitta, right? What would it be like to have this compassion? So, for us, in a practical sense, could we ever get to a place where if someone asked us for the thing that we love the most and that was most dear to us, that it would really benefit them, we would give it to them. It's a very hard thing for most people to think in terms of putting others before themselves or disadvantaging oneself in some way for someone else's benefit, right? It's not perhaps natural, right? But there's something wonderful about it. There's something liberating about having compassion for others and having some kind of love for others. Hearing the name Bodhisattva, I'm thinking, could I develop that? Is that a quality that I can have in myself? It's a very sweet, beautiful quality. how do you learn it, right? Where do you learn how to do that, and how do you get it? It's not like they have it at NYU, right? There's not Compassion 101, Compassion 212, Compassion 314. You know, you go through 4 levels of compassion class, and then you graduate onto, you know, love, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Right? There is no bachelor's, master's, or PhD in love and compassion anywhere really that I know of. And I suppose that's what a monastery is, and I suppose that's what we're here for. Loving another person the way we love ourselves is kind of like a holy grail. You know, this notion that could I really have this feeling of love in my heart all the time? Like, why love anyone else? Why not just love myself? Why not just love myself? Sounds good to me, right? Might give it a try. I think probably we mostly tried it. I think I don't know, if we're all honest, we could probably all say, yeah, I tried that. You know? Did it work? Not so much. Maybe for a little bit, short time, small dose, right? And why not, right? Because we're interacting with people all day long. You know, people are coming into our sphere of existence and being all day long. And every time we interact with someone, that's our feeling experience, that's our valid experience, right? Somebody, we interact with somebody and we feel annoyed by them, guess what? We're filled with annoyance, right? We interact with somebody and we feel like, what's wrong with them? You know, or they're stupid, or, you know, I really don't like this person. I mean, at that moment in time, that's our valid experience, right? I mean, our mind, our heart is full of that sensation. And whatever the thought is, whatever the feeling is, relative to another person, it is really what we're experiencing it with. It is the content of my mind, it is the content of my heart, it is the content of my world and reality of it. So it's not a big leap to say the only way to really be satisfied and fulfilled and happy all the time is to have that feeling directed at everyone around us all the time. I mean, it makes sense, right? So how could we possibly be happy all the time? How could we possibly feel good and uplifted and satisfied and fulfilled all the time if we don't have that general state of being in our heart and our mind constantly relative to everyone around us that we're interacting with, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, I think. Can't review like that. So then how do you do it? How do we get there? How do we accomplish that? Because we can sit here and say, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a nice idea. I'm sign me up, right? I'll take it. Can you give me some of that, please? Can you just give me the magic pill, whatever it is? And the issue is, how do we achieve that? How do we attain that? How do we develop that capacity? You know, how do we get there from where we are right now? So, and it's kind of like a holy grail, right? And there's some kind of liberation and release if we're able to do it. Some kind of feeling of release that we're not just thinking about ourselves all the time. You know, we're extending this feeling of goodness and caring and love towards everyone all the time. And it becomes a general internal state for us, right? So the desire to take care of other people as much as we take care of ourselves is actually a very wise and sophisticated and logical thing to do. It's not a great leap of faith by any means, right? It's just very cold, clear understanding, I would say. So there's no logical reason to take care of ourselves more than anyone else, right? I mean, Mr. Spock says, right, one benefit of many is the benefit of one. Whatever it is Mr. Spock says, I don't know.
Always. You say always.
The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many.
Yeah, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one.
That's,
so,
yeah.
So
in the beginning of the movie.
I mean, even if you just think in a cold, calculated, logical way, right? I mean, why would one person's benefit outweigh the benefit of, 6-7 billion others? Just, give them all, right? Because it's me. I'm the one. That's why. Right? No logic to it, but I understand. I got it too, right? So anyway, we're all wondering, like, okay, so how do I do it? I mean, it's all well and good to say, yeah, I know it doesn't make any logical sense to care about one person more than 7 billion others. I'm vastly in the minority. I grant you, And I grant you, it makes no sense to me personally to be annoyed and irritated at the people around me and to not be loving towards them all day long, because I'm just in a bad mood as a result, you know? And so that doesn't make any sense either. So, okay, all right, it doesn't make any sense to not be compassionate, not be loving. It doesn't make any sense to not be a bodhisattva. But I can't do it. So, so what? How do I do it, you know? So all well and good to say you should, or we want to, or it's better to, but then how do you do it, right? How do you pull it off? So that's the subject we're starting tonight, you know? And the idea is by the end of the guide, Master Shantideva's guide to a bodhisattva's way of life, that we should hopefully have made progress in this regard. We should at least have a clear understanding about what we need to do and have made some kind of resolution to actually go for it, right? So, not because we should, but because it's some kind of great, liberating, beautiful, uplifting experience, right? So we're not here because of should, but it's just very frustrating, right? It's very frustrating to go through the day wanting to be a good person and then screwing up and not being a good person, right? So like, I want to love my kids, I want to love my wife, I want to be nice to people, but I don't, Not because I don't want to, right? Something else going on here, folks, right? What's this other thing that's going on? What's up, right? So to encounter our own selfishness, to encounter our own limitations, to encounter our own lack of compassion, it's just like, it's depressing, right? It's just really a downer. It's really unpleasant. And Master Shantideva says there's a certain strategy you have to follow. He says he makes a plan and he says, hey, look, there's a strategy. If you don't follow the strategy, you can't do it. Well, obviously I'm not following Master Shantideva's strategy because I'm not succeeding a lot of the time, right? So Master Shantideva says, look, there's a certain way you have to go about getting compassion. If you haven't got it already, which some people in here may, I have no idea. I can't read anyone's mind. I have no idea who you are. You're all holy beings that are just helping me out, or whether there's any affliction to work on over there. But he says, look, there's a plan, and you have to study it, and you have to follow it, you have to put it into action, and then as a result, you get the result. As a result, you get the results. Okay. Bad grammar, all right. You bring it about. So he says there's a method, and you've got to follow the method. You meet people in life, and you meet people who have been on the Buddhist or on the spiritual path for perhaps 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? And some of them are really beautiful people. Some of them aren't. Doesn't matter they've been doing it 20 years, right? Some people have been doing it 20 years and they're just like, I do my prayers every day, I do my prostrations every day, I do my practices every day. I don't get it. I'm just as unhappy as I was 10 years ago. It's just, not much has changed. I just have a lot of commitments and obligations and, rigmarole that I have to go through every day, but so what? I'm still the same unhappy guy I was before, more or less. So, they're unfortunately not following those necessary steps. They're not doing it properly, they're not serious about it, they're not committed to it. And, I confess that I go through periods in my life where I'm just like, oh yeah, I understand all that, that's a good idea. And then I just get on with my life, right? It's like, oh yeah, I understand, yeah, I got it. Okay, I'm busy now, right? I got things to do. Let me just jump out of bed and get moving here. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to do this, that, the other. So, and unfortunately, there is a direct correlation between following the program and getting the result. And understanding the program is insufficient to get the result, as I can personally attest to. Okay, one must follow the program to get the result. All right. Sadly, all right. So, hopefully the classes will go on. Maybe not. Things happen to us, but probably won't hear this outline from Master Shantideva again for a very long time. Last time I heard this was 15 years ago. Last time I was exposed to these teachings was 15 years ago, when Holy Geshe Michael originally taught them. Haven't heard them since. Haven't been exposed to them since. The only reason I'm exposed to them now is because I had to go back and review for this class. Otherwise I wouldn't have been exposed to them. Right? So it really is important to jump on it and do it. when you're exposed to it the first time. Rather than thinking, oh, next time, later. You have to think about it. You have to pay attention. You've got to start doing it. So you don't know that you'll ever hear this material again. You don't know that you'll ever have the opportunity again. And it's very easy to just have years go by where we're just busy and not getting to it. And then guess what? Just have ordinary suffering, life, and death. So we have to get into it. So please say Gyalken. Tunken. So we have to get rid of Gyalkens and collect Tunkens. Ken means a condition, and Gyal means something that works against something. So it's like you want to cook an omelet, a cheddar omelet, but you don't have the cheddar cheese, right? There's something missing, something not going to work there. So, there's something working against you, right? Something that's going to prohibit you from being able to do what you want. It's like a factor or condition which is working against what you're trying to do or what you want, right? So, you could say, it's contradictory or working against you. Tunken is the opposite. Tunken is a conducive condition, something which is facilitating what you're trying to do, something which is supportive of what you're trying to do. It's like you want to practice cooking, and so at work they stick you in the kitchen to work in the kitchen, It's just a natural, conducive condition. So we're starting the second chapter of the guide. Remember, the first chapter was the sales pitch, where we talked about how beautiful true bodhicitta is and how amazing it is and all the benefits and how you should want it, right? So the idea is you're supposed to really be motivated and want it and aspire to it. So to have this understanding that loving other people as much as you love yourself is really liberating and really beautiful and something to attain. Right? So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that's preventing that? What's blocking us from achieving that? What's the problem? Right? Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we able to do it? If we were able to do it and we were walking around the streets of Manhattan, we'd have a totally different view. We'd have a totally different experience of life, right? It would be a completely, utterly different perspective. So there are certain things that prevent us from reaching a stage where we care about other people as much as ourselves. If we were walking around the streets and going to the subway caring about other people as much as ourselves, can you imagine what you'd be doing on the subway, right? Or even as you walk down the street? Very different experience. So there are certain conducive conditions we have to gather together, and certain conditions that we have to eliminate, which are obstacles and which are blocking us. Imagine if you're trying to build a fire, right? It's like collecting the wood and the matches, and then trying to build a fire in the rain, versus having all of the material that you need. Have plenty of kerosene and plenty of matches and plenty of dry wood and a nice sunny day. Very easy to start a fire and build a fire when all the conditions are right. Very difficult to build a fire, if you've got rain and wet wood and no gasoline. So we have to study the things which block us, which are spiritual obstacles. There are inner obstacles that we're not even aware that we have. There are things inside of us which are obstacles preventing us from developing this compassion. They hold us back, and we don't even realize that we've got them. And even if we knew what they were, we wouldn't have a clue about how to eliminate them and how to remove them. So we have to get rid of them, and so those are the Gyalkens, the hindering conditions that we have to get rid of. Right? And if we can remove them, then half the battle's over. If we can get rid of our inner obstacles to developing compassion and love for all beings, then we're halfway there. Okay. So we have to learn to identify those inner obstacles, and then we have to learn how to eliminate them. And we start with the intention. We have to have some kind of appreciation for how appealing and how sexy and how attractive it would be to actually have compassion, right? Once we understand that, then we have Munsan. You remember Munsan we talked about? Does anybody remember?
Wishing a form of prayer.
Yeah, aspiring or aspirational bodhicitta. We talked last week about real bodhicitta, true bodhicitta, right? Which follows after the direct perception of emptiness. But then for those of us who are not receiving ultimate reality, we have this aspirational bodhicitta, right, in the form of a prayer. So, we have this understanding, we have this appreciation for how great life could be if we had true compassion, and some appreciation for that and some desire for that. And so, we do have that aspiring bodhicitta already, right? And then the second form of bodhicitta was juksa, which is some kind of engaging, right? Engaging bodhicitta, right? And so, we have the intention to do something. We're coming to class, right? We are doing something. We are taking action. So we do actually have this form of engaging bodhicitta, We have some appreciation for the beauty of compassion and love for all other beings. We have some aspiration to it. We have some intention to learn about it and do something about it, and we come to class. So we already have aspiring bodhicitta, and we already have engaging bodhicitta, right? Now, it's not the real thing, right? I mean, it's not true bodhicitta, but it's a good start, right? So, they're not real bodhicitta yet, but they're the two kinds of bodhicitta that we start with. So we have to study these gelkens, these hindering conditions which are inside us, and what to do about them, right? And we have to learn how to identify them and how to get rid of them. So the second chapter of the guide, which is what we are going to get into, is the art of Dikpa Shakpa. Please say Dikpa Shakpa. Dikpa. Shakpa. Dikpa means a bad deed, right? And shakpa means to split yourself open, like when you split a log open, like that, right? And it means to open yourself. And it's just opening your heart and admitting what you've done, admitting the non-virtues and bad deeds that we've done. And it's a purification process. And we're going to go into that in the next class. Because even to get to Dikpa Shakpa, to purification, we have to do some other things first as a preliminary to even be able to get to purification practice. Very typically we'll sit down and just say, let me just purify my negative karma here real quick, boom, 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 okay, I purified my negative karma. But not really. There are several other things which have to come first to be able to successfully purify one's negative karma. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. There are three other things that have to come first. So, basically we're not even clean enough to start purifying our negative karma yet. We have to collect enough goodness to even be able to sort of reach the first step to do the karmic purifications. Like a little kid, trying to reach the handle on the door, you're not quite there yet. You need a little boost up. So we have to do some kind of like little mini good karma collecting. So there are certain actions that are very effective to collect the necessary virtue and good karma to get to the point to be able to do purification. It's like a bridge or a step to be able to make it to the purification. So the second chapter of the guide is on purifying your heart and cleaning your heart and removing the negativities and the stains and the bad deeds from one's heart, right? Because obviously if we're going to just be a loving being, we can't have festering wounds and festering resentment and festering anger and sort of like, I'll get him, So you got to clean this stuff out a little bit, right? So anyway, before we get to that next week, we're going to talk about the preliminaries. And you can't get bodhicitta unless you do proper purification. Impossible to attain bodhicitta without cleaning out these negative impulses in one's heart. I mean, it just makes sense, right? How could you have this ultimate love if your heart is full of all these negative impulses to screw people over in return for being screwed, or whatever else might be going on? So it's just common sense. But anyway, so we've got to clean our heart to be able to have this ultimate love. And to be able to clean these things from our heart, we have to collect some goodness to boost us up, to be able to bump out that negativity, to be able to displace that negativity or remove that negativity or undercut that negativity in some way, right? So if we don't do these other three things first, then it's not possible for purification to really work, right? So we're going to study those three things tonight. So these three activities get us to the point where we can do purification, right? And purification is really expelling these inner obstacles, right? So, cleaning your dirt, right? Like, clean the dirt, clean the negativity, create some positive energy so we can get rid of inner obstacles, right? Okay. So, please say Chaksel. Chaksel Wa, sorry.
Chaksel Wa.
Means prostrating or bowing down. Chak means hand. It's an honorific word for hand. And Sawa means to look for something. So, I mean, what does it mean to look for the hand? Right? I mean, it's
The hand?
hand, yeah, like, yeah, it's sort of not a direct meaning. So the idea here is the teacher or the Lama has something in their hand that they can give to you. And when one does prostration, one is asking them to give what they have in their hand to you, right? To grant that to you. So that's the etymology. That's the idea. And you know, what is it that the Lama has? You know, what is it that we're asking for? Well, we're going to talk about it. And so you have to do prostration to begin to collect this virtue. So now, very typically, people say like, oh, you know, you go to a Buddhism class for the first time, or you see Buddhists for the first time, perhaps, or some big Lama, and there's a big teaching, and then everybody starts prostrating, and you're just going like, what the hell's going on? You know, what are they doing, right? And I mean, I don't know what they're doing, right? They're all prostrating. Christianity says you're not supposed to bow down to like graven images and people and false gods, and you know, I grew up with that. We all grew up with that, I think. Most of us grew up with that. So there's this implicit discomfort with the notion of like, why is everybody bowing down to that guy up there? You know, what's up with that? And it's against the commandments, right? So it's hard to get into it at first. I mean, certainly when I started, I couldn't get into it. I mean, it was at some monastery, and I'm just going like, yeah, this is really not for me, right? And I'm not really into this bowing down thing. And I don't know, maybe it's pride, maybe it's just unfamiliarity, but it just seems wrong somehow as a Westerner coming at Buddhism from another tradition, right? Very uncomfortable. So typically, you know, I didn't go along with it initially. I mean, I was not rushing to prostrate and bow down and throw myself in the dirt just because some guy was standing up there going to give a lecture for an hour or two, right? It's just so. You have to talk about what it is, you know. Is it just some Asian custom? Is it just some Tibetan custom? Is it some holdover from the past, some superstition, right? Is it a form of exercise? Say if you do 100,000 prostrations, good things happen. Abs of steel, I don't know. What is it? So, it comes from the awareness and the recognition and the understanding of what one's natural reaction would be if one encountered pure holiness, right? You know, if one encounters some utterly, totally holy thing, what would one's natural reaction be, right? So it's said that should one perceive ultimate reality directly, for example, one is perceiving one part of an enlightened being, one part of a Buddha. And so when one comes out of that direct perception of ultimate reality, the natural response and the natural reaction is to just throw oneself down on the ground, face down, you know, in prostration, you know, in awe and in humility and in respect, and because it's just a natural reflexive behavior in response to what one has experienced, right? Like, you know, if there were God and God walked into the room and you could see him, and you know, and it was like this awe-inspiring thing, you know, what would you do? You'd be like really like, oh, you know, or you'd be, you know, prostrating on the ground or something, right? And so this is the idea with prostration. There's no hesitation or no second thought about it. If one perceives, you know, an enlightened being, a pure, total, holy being, even emptiness, which is, one part of a Buddha, the natural reaction is to throw oneself down on the ground and to prostrate, and that's where it comes from, and that's the point of it. You know, it's not that it's like there's nothing, it's not like I'm a bad person, or I have to grovel in front of this, this lama up there in robes, or he's better than me, and so I have to, touch his feet or something like that. That's a misunderstanding, a misapprehension of what this is about and where it's coming from, right? So, it's like here in a room like this, there's a sense of, ooh, how do I look? What do people think of me? I mean, it's a natural human tendency, not this room, but anywhere. Do I look silly? Are people going to think there's something wrong with me if I do it or if I don't do it? But in fact, as a reflexive natural reaction to pure, total holiness and purity, there's just nothing else to do. There's no other possible response. There's no other possible reaction. So we would just, we just get down in the dirt and wait there until like somebody said, get up, if we saw that kind of holiness or holy being. So, so that's the frame of mind that's involved in doing the prostration. Now, what do we do when we do prostration? Like in terms of actually making a real prostration. Like in the monastery, if they catch you misbehaving, then they punish you severely, depending on what you're doing, of course. But, for example, they catch you, there's a disciplinarian, a giku, and they catch you, and then they make you do 100,000 prostrations, for example, as a punishment, say. Yeah, right? Not like with your kids, right? Where you're like, I'm throwing your candy away, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, that's right. You do a rosary, right? We'll take it. I'll take the... If only. So, so when they have these types of punishments in the monastery and they have to do these extensive prostrations, which take a long time, then the discipline, the giku, the master of discipline is, he's yelling at the monk doing the prostrations, don't waste the time. Don't waste the time. Don't be wasting the effort. Don't waste the time. And the point here is you're doing these prostrations, and they're not just physical exercise. This is not about just, okay, now you have to count how many times you jump up and down. You're supposed to be thinking about something when you're doing the prostration. You're supposed to have a certain mental attitude when you're doing the prostration. And if you don't have that mental attitude, then you're wasting it. You're wasting the prostration, and you're wasting the time. And you're missing the point. So prostrations are actually a wonderful opportunity to waste time. I mean, just jumping up and down a couple of times is can just be mainly exercise, right? Normally when we do prostrations, we're thinking about, am I going to bump my head on the floor? Am I close enough? Or am I going to fall over? Or I shouldn't have eaten so much? Or or whatever, right? So. If we're not thinking about the presence of an enlightened being, if we're not thinking about the presence of the Dharmakaya, then we're wasting the time. And it's not a spiritual activity. And we're not accomplishing anything, and we're not doing a real prostration. So, how to say? If people are doing a spiritual practice and they're not getting a result, they're doing something wrong. Or it's not a valid path, one or the other. So, you meet people who do these practices for a very long time, and they end up just not getting results. And usually it's because of missing some key understanding or some key component of their practice. And it's extremely important to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Okay? So in the case of prostrations, you've got to understand that we are behaving the way we would behave if we were in the presence of the Dharmakaya, this ultimate nature of reality, this aspect of an enlightened being, right? And so that has to be the basis for our prostration, and that has to be the thought process in our mind when we're doing a prostration, right? I'm prostrating to holiness and to a holy being. And if we're not thinking like that, then we're wasting the time and we're wasting the effort, right? So, otherwise we're just getting older. We're not collecting virtue, and we're not engaging in any kind of meaningful spiritual practice. We're wasting the time, and we just get older. Nothing happens. 10 years go by and not much has happened. And it's a failure. It's a failure of our practice, right? I mean, if we engage in these practices in an incorrect or incomplete way and we don't get results, then we failed in our practice. And that's a sad thing. It's a shame. So and it comes from wasting time. So prostrations are sacred in that it's a chance to do something which has no other purpose. You know, it's not like somebody's going to say, "Aren't you cool? You're prostrating." You know, in this culture, in this society, it's not like there's some valuing, some appreciation for people who prostrate. You know, nobody's going to applaud you. Nobody's going to give you an award because you did prostrations, right? So there's no social pressure to do it. We're not going to get any money from it. Nobody's going to compensate us. It's this thing we're doing just because of some understanding we have in our mind, just because of some thought we have in our mind. There's no other reason to do it other than because of thinking some certain thought, which is a sacred thought and which is a holy thought. So it's an opportunity to say in our life, you know, I'm following a spiritual path and I'm doing something which has no worldly benefit and no worldly value. You know, prostrating, nobody in the normal world values it. Nobody in the normal world appreciates it. I'm not going to get anything for doing it. The reason I'm doing it is to make a statement that I believe there are holy beings here. There's a holy being here. I believe, you know, that ultimate reality is here, and I believe that this is some kind of profound statement about the nature of reality, and my affirmation of that, and my taking a stand to say, you know, there's a holy being here, and I'm bowing down to it. Right? I'm on a spiritual path. It's a gesture, right? The Dharmakaya exists. The Dharmakaya is in this room, and I believe the Buddha's here, and I want to reach that thing. So prostration is that. And so when one sees emptiness directly, the day that one experiences emptiness in the Dharmakaya, one just naturally gets down on the floor, you know. And so until we have that direct realization and that direct reflexive behavior, then in the meantime we're making a statement. And we're saying, you know, I believe in those things. I believe in the Dharmakaya. I believe in enlightened beings. And I'm acknowledging that, and I'm acting this way as a result. So just we'll talk about the mechanics of it briefly, but the point is to not waste the time, to not waste the prostration by thinking about meaningless, mindless things. You know? Have to be thinking about emptiness, Dharmakaya, holy beings, and bowing down to those things, making that statement, right? So, I mean, if you waste the time, we won't get bodhicitta. You know, we'll be one of those people who doesn't get the results, who doesn't get the realizations. We didn't do it, right? And you know, we just end up getting old and having more suffering. So when we prostrate in the, I guess you would say the Indian, Tibetan, Buddhist tradition, when we prostrate, we have we put our hands together in front of our heart. The thumbs are sort of in the middle. So they say so that your hands are not empty. So the idea is it's like a jewel, like your thumbs are as if you're holding a jewel in your hand. So when you place your hands together, the idea is your thumbs are sort of in the middle. So that's how the placement of your hands. And then we touch the four places, the crown of our head. And that is I guess supposed to be a cause for attaining the physical parts of Buddha, the physical elements of a Buddha. And there's this thing called the classic Nirmanakaya, right? The Nirmanakaya is the emanation, the form that a Buddha takes, the physical form that a Buddha takes. So a Buddha can emanate countless physical forms. And so the classic, Nirmanakaya is what we see in a tanka, for example. There's the bump on the head and the long earlobes and all these other various signs and marks of a Buddha, right? So, why do we say classic? Well, does a Buddha have to emanate that way? No, they don't have to have long ears and a bump on their head, right? What would be the point, right? They can appear in any way. They don't have to have an Asian face or slanty eyes or certain kind of, spot on the middle of their forehead. They could be anybody, right? They could emanate as a dog or a chair or a tree, anything that would benefit someone, right? And they could be the person sitting next to you. Why not? We wouldn't know if that was an emanation of a holy being, right? So, now we have all these sort of Asian-looking paintings because Buddhism went to India and Tibet, and that's basically where it came to us from. But if you go back to the tankas, which were painted before Buddhism spread to India and Tibet, there are a lot of Greek-looking guys on tankas, sort of whitish, Greekish-looking Buddhas. It's just a function of the culture and the society that it's spread to. And there's no reason why a Buddha wouldn't be the most beautiful person that you've ever run into. Why wouldn't a Buddha be the hottest person you've ever seen walking past you on the street, right? The hottest boy or girl you see walking past you on the street. Why wouldn't a Buddha emanate that way, right? No reason they couldn't if it was be of some benefit, right? So anyway. So then, secondly, there's called Minsam, which is the spot here. So we have first the hands are there, and then secondly there. And there's a particular quality that, again, the classic Nirmanakaya and the enlightened Buddha has some significance it's a special mark that has some special significance, but I'm not going to go into it. They say, anyway, there's a lot of detail about the special mark here. So when you touch your palms there, the idea is it's creating a cause for that, and then you touch your palms to your throat, which is creating the cause for having the speech of an enlightened being, and then touching the palms to the heart to create the causes to have the mind of an enlightened being. So those are the 4 points that one touches with one's hands, and then the custom is to go down slowly when one prostrates. Any idea why? Remember? You probably know. Something about the hell realms, right?
Yeah.
The idea is you're thinking, I don't want to go to the hell realms, I don't want to go down. So it's just some kind of thing you do with your mind where it's sort of saying, it's a mental training, a mind training, remind oneself of the lower realms, I don't want to go there, right? And so, if going to lower realms is just a question of a perceptual shift, right? If reality is the result of perceptual events and perceptual ripenings, right? All it takes is 30 seconds for our perceptions to shift sufficiently to perceive ourselves in another realm. There's nothing that says someone in this room couldn't perceive them in a hell realm in 30 seconds if our mind and perceptions shift in that way, right? So if the lower realms are self-existent, if they weren't empty, it would be kind of hard to get there, right? It would be this hard, concrete thing which wouldn't change and be difficult to get into or get out of, right? So anyway, going down slow is a statement. I don't want to be there. I don't want to head there fast. And so when we go down to the ground, the palms are flat on the ground, and then we touch our knees and forehead to the floor, and that's called a short prostration, right? When you see the Dharmakaya directly for the first time, we do a long prostration. It's just throwing your body flat down on the floor, with your face on the floor and your whole body on the floor, arms extended out. And it's the natural reaction to meeting one of those beings. But in the meantime, until we do that, then it's a question of trying to visualize those holy beings. When you do a prostration, you can imagine or think about or visualize those holy beings there that you're prostrating to in terms of making that statement, right? They're there in front of you. So when we do the prostration, we want to try to visualize certain objects in front of us. So what are the objects that we want to try to visualize in front of us? And so we're going to talk about that. So the objects of our prostration, please say Kyonchok, Sum. Kyonchok means very rare, very hard to find. Kon means very rare, very hard to find. And Chok means highest or supreme. And Sum is the number 3. In Sanskrit, Triratna, 3 jewels. The supreme hard to find in early Tibetan was their euphemism for a jewel. Didn't find a lot of diamonds in Tibet, I suppose. So these are the most important objects of prostration. And this is true going for refuge, the ultimate object of all 3 preliminary activities. So the 3 preliminary activities we're going to talk about, doing prostrations, taking refuge, and making offerings, all of those are done in relation to the 3 jewels, right? And we have to talk about what that is and what that means and what it looks like to do it properly, all right? So the 3 jewels are the ultimate object of all 3 preliminary activities. And before we can do any karmic purification, we have to do these 3 preliminaries. And the 3 preliminaries are aimed at these 3 jewels. All right? So, these say Sangye,
Sangye.
Konchok.
Konchok.
Sangye is Buddha, and Konchok again is jewel. So there's the difference between a Buddha and a Buddha jewel. Okay? They're not exactly the same thing. So when you do a prostration, who are you doing a prostration to? When we make offerings, who are we making offerings to? Are we going for refuge? Who are we going for refuge to, right? So there are 2 kinds of Sangye Konchok. One that's real and one that's not real. Okay? Called the one which is real and the one which is not real. The so-called Buddha jewel and the real Buddha jewel. The so-called Buddha jewel are these pictures and statues, right, all around us. So, when we prostrate, do we prostrate over there to those Buddhas, or do we prostrate over there to those Buddhas, or to this Buddha? Who are we prostrating to? What's, does it matter? What's the point, right? The so-called Buddha jewel, these pictures and statues, they're not the real Buddha jewel, okay? It's a representation of a Buddha, a representation of an enlightened being. One of the things that happens to a person when they perceive ultimate reality or emptiness is that they are perceiving the Dharmakaya, they are perceiving a part of an enlightened being. And so when they come down out of that experience and see these pictures, these images, and these tankas, they recognize that they are seeing something which they just perceived as ultimate reality. It's like, it's no longer a painting, it's a photograph. They recognize that someone saw enlightened beings directly, and they taught someone how to paint them, and they taught someone, and they taught someone, and they taught someone, and there are actually very strict rules as to how one can and cannot paint a tanka, very specific and strict rules about painting tankas and enlightened images. So that's something that happens to you after the experience of emptiness is you recognize you met the Dharmakaya and you say, oh, this is a picture of what I saw. Not saw with your eyes, but experienced with your mind. And you recognize that those images are representations of that, accurate representations of that. And so there's a particular special appreciation for tankas and for these holy images. So when we prostrate to the pictures, they're not the Buddha jewel. Right? What is the Buddha jewel? The Buddha jewel is the Dharmakaya. Right? Is the emptiness, mainly the emptiness, right, of the other parts of an enlightened being. Right? So it's the main thing that we're making offerings to. It's the main thing that we're prostrating to. The main thing that we're going to refuge to. Okay, is the ultimate nature, the empty nature of that enlightened being, right? Which is the Dharmakaya. Basically the emptiness of the Buddha. So the main refuge, the main object which is worthy of your offerings and your prostrations and your taking refuge, right? The main thing that you get face down on the ground for is Dharmakaya. Right? It's the emptiness of enlightened being. Right? And then, after one experiences the Dharmakaya, after one attains the Dharmakaya, a millisecond later, one attains the ability to generate countless emanation bodies, countless form bodies, and to send them to all beings in all realms. So, millisecond later, one has the ability to send out all these pictures of oneself. So, so Paul attains the Dharmakaya, and then all of a sudden, a millisecond later, he's emanating himself to the other side of Manhattan to help somebody who needs something. And in the first instant of enlightenment, one attains and becomes the Dharmakaya. So, physical form can be anything, but the main essence of an enlightened being is their emptiness. And so that's what we're prostrating to, and that's what we're making offerings to, and that's what we're going to refuge to, right? So, but what's the point, right? I mean, okay, so I make offerings to the emptiness of a Buddha. I mean, is it going to eat my cookies? Is the emptiness of an enlightened being going to eat the cookies off the altar? You know, I mean, can the emptiness of an enlightened being see me prostrating? Right. So, what's the point of doing it? I mean, what's the benefit, right? I mean, what's the benefit of prostrating to something which doesn't even seem like it exists? What's the benefit of something? What's the benefit of prostrating to something which is empty of any self-existent nature of its own, right? I mean, how does that do anything, right? And we're going to talk about it, we have to study it, but that's the essence of the first jewel. There's some way in which ultimate reality, the ultimate nature of things, emptiness, and recognizing that, prostrating relative to that, offering relative to that, and going for refuge to that, there's some way in which that impacts us and our spiritual obstacles and our mind stream and our spiritual body and our spiritual life. So we have to talk about it. Okay, please say chu. Konchok. So chu means dharma, and konchok again means jewel. This is the dharma jewel, which is not the same thing as dharma, right? Dharma basically means, dharma can have different meanings. It can mean the teachings, right? It can mean any existing thing, right? But that's different than what we're prostrating to. When we talk about the dharma, we're not prostrating to that, to the teachings. We're prostrating to the dharma jewel. We're offering to the dharma jewel. And it's the one we're taking refuge in as well. So if we do it well, then we'll be ready to purify ourselves. And if we don't, then we won't succeed in purifying our negative imprints and karmas. Okay? If we take refuge and prostrate and make offerings well to the dharma jewel, then we will collect the positive spiritual energy and virtue that we need to be able to do, to be able to purify our negative imprints in our heart and develop love and compassion for all living beings, right? We'll be able to get a kind of love for others which is as great as the love we have for ourselves, right? Which is our aspiration and goal, hopefully. And if we don't, if we don't do a thoughtful, appropriate going for refuge and prostration and offering to the Dharma jewel and the Buddha jewel, then we won't succeed in the practice, and we won't have the spiritual energy we need, and we won't be able to clean out the negative energies from our heart. Okay. So, I think it's fairly evident that we degenerate as we go through life. It's not a steady state, right? And I'm spiritually. It's not the case that we're just naturally becoming more spiritual and more holy and more pure as a matter of course as we're going through our life, right? Left to our own devices, we just become more and more materialistic and more earthen and leaden and interested in looking after myself and getting the things I want and all the rest. So it requires effort, and it requires engaging in the practice in a serious way. And if we do a half-baked practice, we get a half-baked result, and we end up, in a half-baked rebirth, right? Which is not what we're trying for, right? So we don't want to end up in some, lousy places. We don't want to just end up getting old and dying because we weren't serious and we didn't make effort. So, when you meet people who have practiced for 10 years and they're just like, I didn't get any result. What did I do wrong? I've been trying for 10 years and it didn't work. Did I do something wrong? What did I do wrong? And so this is it. This is the problem. This is one of the things that can go wrong. Most people will end up as a bunch of courses, and a few people will have the sweet result and the sweet realizations and the sweet outcome of a very holy, pure end of life, where they have this infinite love in their heart and this very beautiful realization and this very beautiful experience. So hopefully that's us. So when we're bowing down, when we're prostrating, when we're making offerings, you have to understand what the Dharma jewel is, right? And so it's not just books, right? The Dharma is the text. The Dharma is the teachings. When His Holiness the Dalai Lama gives a teaching, when he stands up there and gives a profound and holy and beautiful lecture, he's teaching Dharma, obviously. But that's not the Dharma jewel. Okay, that's the Dharma. And so when we're going for refuge, we're not going for refuge to the Dharma. We're not going for refuge to all the Buddhist texts. And we're not going for refuge to all the teachings that we've heard and all the teachings that are going to be spoken. Okay? The verbal teachings, right? That's not the Dharma jewel, right? So what is the Dharma jewel? It's two things. Dharma jewel is comprised of two things. Realizations.
That leads to the direct perception.
The realization of emptiness, the direct experience of emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness. And we talked last week about the 5 stages of realization, right, that lead to enlightenment. The third path, or the third level of realization is the direct experience of ultimate reality, right? So seeing emptiness directly is the ultimate Dharma jewel. It's the real Dharma jewel. So, when you bow down, you're bowing down as you would when you have the real experience of ultimate reality. You're bowing down to the Dharma jewel just as if you were experiencing it directly. Right? So, you're down on the floor, on your face, bowing down to that ultimate reality and the direct perception of that. So, and similarly, when we make offerings, we're making offerings to the direct perception of emptiness. Right? And similarly, when we go for refuge, we're going for refuge to the direct perception of emptiness. So, it's not that there's some guy sitting up on a throne that's extra special because there's a lot of brocade up there, and a flowery gold carved, deer and 8-spoke wheel and jewels and all the rest. We're bowing down to ultimate reality, to highest reality, to pure reality, right? And so that's the Dharma jewel, right? Now the second part of the Dharma jewel are any of these? Cessations. Thanks, Jim. Cessation. So a couple of examples, right? So let's say you have a direct experience of ultimate reality and you perceive emptiness directly in deep meditation, right? When you come out of that experience, right, you will have, after you come out of that experience, you have the direct awareness of all of your future lives. You see yourself becoming enlightened directly, right? You know that you'll never suffer again in any kind of meaningful way, right? You see all these things directly. So you know you're going to become a Buddha, right? Who's going to talk you out of it? I mean, you saw it for a fact. You know it to be true. You know when it's going to happen. You know how it's going to be happen. You know the circumstances. You know the timeline, right? So who's going to convince you that there's no such thing as a Buddha? There's no such thing as future lives. That there's no such thing as a valid Buddhist path. So that's a cessation. It's a cessation of doubt in your mind. Doubt about the Buddhist path, doubt about enlightenment is forever finished in that person's mind. Right? Permanent cessation. No one can ever talk you out of it again. Right? That's an example of cessation, right? And then similarly, even before one has a direct experience of ultimate reality or emptiness, if you remember on the second path that we talked about, which is what? Anybody remember? Second of the 5 paths?
Path of the Cleaners, preparation.
Yeah, preparing to see emptiness,
Oh,
which comes before seeing emptiness. Path of preparation. There's a certain level one gets to at the path of preparation, which is the third level of that second path, where it's impossible to ever take rebirth in lower realms again, because one's understanding of the nature of reality is so refined and deep and solid that one can never have enough substantial negative karma to take low rebirth again. Okay, so that's another example of a cessation. One achieves a certain intellectual understanding of emptiness on the second path, and as a result of that, it's impossible that one could ever take rebirth in a lower realm. It can't happen. So that's a cessation, permanently ended, Can never happen again. Impossible, right? Never. So, so those two things, seeing emptiness directly, and having cessations, like the cessation of doubt, right? Those two things are the Dharma jewel, right? So if you put out your water bowls in the morning, right? Who are you putting them out for? If you're putting them out for the Dharma jewel, I mean, what are you putting your water bowls out for? I mean, what do you think? Why would you put water bowls out for a cessation? I mean, can a cessation drink some water?
But it's like a mind that you're putting out for, not for an actual being.
Can a mind drink water? Like, I mean, why put stuff out for a cessation? I mean, if the Dharma jewel is the perception of emptiness and the cessations that come after that, I mean, what good are some water bowls to the Dharma jewel? Or some cookies or whatever the case might be, right? Right? I mean, can the absence of doubt consume water? No, I mean, obviously not. Right? So are we all crazy? Right? I mean, can the emptiness of the Buddha's, can the emptiness of the Buddha's other three bodies, drink the water? I mean, it's the absence of something. It's an unchanging state. Can an unchanging state, consume offerings? It seems to not make any sense, right? So, what do you think?
No, John, it does make sense, actually.
Yes, we have an answer. Let's do the Sangha jewel. We'll let everybody mull it over. We'll do the Sangha jewel, and then we'll come back to it. And we'll be back to Jeremy. So please say Gendu.
Gendu.
Koncho.
Control.
Gendu means Sangha, in Sanskrit, Sangha. So, nominally, who?
Us.
Aryas or us? Which one?
Aryas.
Neither, I'm sorry.
Monks.
Those folks running around in red towels, red wraps, red robes. No disrespect.
Is it assembly of persons who are realized?
The nominal Sangha jewel are the ordained, people who are ordained, people who have taken ordination and they wear the robes of monks and nuns, right? So they are the nominal Sangha, right? So the real Sangha, the Sangha jewel to which we prostrate, right? To which we make offerings, to which we go for refuge, is what? Yeah, those who have had a direct perception of emptiness or ultimate reality, of being which has had the experience of ultimate reality. That's the true Sangha jewel, right? So if you think about it, when a person has a direct experience of ultimate reality, perceives emptiness, they become two of the three jewels, right? Which two?
Dharma jewel and Sangha. They Buddha jewels and Sangha jewel. Well, they achieve the emptiness of the Buddha's mind.
It's only three choices. Pick two.
Dharma and the Sangha.
Well, the Dharma jewel is the direct perception of emptiness, right?
So they have that.
Which they've experienced.
The other two.
And the Sangha jewel are those who have had the direct experience of
But
emptiness.
couldn't you say because they've seen emptiness, they've then attained the emptiness of the Buddha's mind?
But they have
You
this-
could say they've, I wouldn't say they've attained it. Say
Okay,
they've
well, they're-
experienced it.
They've experienced.
So you have to make the distinction between they've attained it and they've saw it or experienced it or whatever the case might be.
Because once you have a direct perception of emptiness, you still can have lots of negative seeds that you have to burn off before you can reach full enlightenment. So
Because, yeah,
might
but-
be a second, no more than 7 lives.
So because the direct perception of emptiness is which path? Third path of 5, right? So, having the direct perception of emptiness, you still have 2 full paths to work through. Right? So you're not enlightened yet. You're mostly there. Right? So anyway, so when people are making offerings, right, and doing prostrations and going for refuge to the 3 jewels, anyone who's an Arya has 2 of those 3 jewels, right? They're seeking protection from you, right? They're looking to you for help. So you know, you have the Dharma jewel in your mind and you are the Sangha jewel, right? So, if you know anyone who's seen emptiness, good person to go to refuge to. Okay, and then I think let's take a break, and then we'll continue afterwards, okay? Hopefully there were snacks.
I have corrected papers here. Beautiful.